Hi, welcome back. So part 2 is in the Logic DAW itself. We're going to just go through how to load an instance of Contact for anyone who missed it. So you go up here to your plus button where you can add a track, and I'm going to choose a software instrument, and you can select Contact 7, but just let's say it's empty, so we'll just add it as an empty so that we can browse to it from the Logic window itself and not have it preloaded. But once you've loaded Contact 7 once on one of these DAWs, every time you add a new track, it will also load with a Contact 7. So you have to set it up the first time, but then every other track you add, it becomes easier. So now I just create an empty channel strip. So this is a virtual instrument because that's what we're working with in this module. Then I'll name it my new instrument. And then you go down here to where it says instrument. You don't want MIDI effects or audio effects. You want instrument. So activate that. The first batch is simply the Logic instruments, and we don't want those. You want to go down to AU instruments, native instruments, Contact 7, and stereo. Like we were saying in the class the other week, sometimes you want to load a mono instrument. One case for that would be if you're loading a bass instrument. Often a bass instrument works a little better if it's on a mono track. So it just depends on what you're doing. So let's load stereo. And then you get this kind of pretty annoying window in my view. It's not the way Contact used to be. You used to get straight down to business, but they have this kind of a little bit of window dressing here of their kind of instruments they're trying to push. So by clicking rack view, so view, rack view, and then library, you'll get to this window here, which is where you want to be. So now I want to load a new instrument. So I'm just going to navigate to my folder so I know my folder where it is. So I'm assuming maybe you've placed one already. So this is one you've saved already. And you can see here I have this this file here. It's called .nki. Remember we said NKI, native contact instrument. I think that's what it means. And then it's got a little kind of keyboard icon. So pretty much get the idea that this is some kind of instrument, you know. It's not NKM because you remember NKM is a multi-instrument, and we're not really doing multi-instruments in this module. So if you drag that over to the window, you can see the plus comes up, and then it'll load the instrument. And there, loaded. Lovely. So I'm just going to X. So that's how you load an instrument in Contact. Like I said before, if you kind of add a new one, and then if you reset it to the one you want. So if I reset this here, native instruments, I'd like to say if you're in this module, you know you're going to be loading a lot of Contact instruments on separate tracks. So set it up from the beginning in this window, and then create every time you load an instrument. If I load a new track now, defaults to the same one. You see it's defaulted back to Contact 7 now, and then I can go create that again. Alternately, I can create multiple tracks. So if I want to create like several of these, not just one, can I do that? Yes. So if I go down to number of tracks here, if that's hard to see, I'll zoom in. Where it says number of tracks, I'll put in 8, for example. Let's say I wanted to add 8 brass instruments into my arrangement. Then I add 8, and then I go create, and all of a sudden, wow, I've got loads and loads of brass instruments. I don't want them, so I'm going to hit Command Z, and then I'm going to delete these 2 as well because I don't want those. So back to the 4 that I had before. So that's loading an instrument that you've created already. So here's what I created already. It's called Vindas, and it's 0G. The library's name is 0G, so I labeled it ZG. And then Vindaloops, which is the name of the sample library. And then this one is called Effects. So then you can hear that those loops on with some effects on them. So that explains the name. I usually tend to name and label my instruments and also my tracks with a name that describes what they do. Okay, so now watch this though. So you can see that if you look down here, you can see that in this folder we have several instruments. There's like 3 different instruments inside this folder called Vindas. And right now I have one of those instruments selected. Now I pointed out these arrows to you in the slideshow, so I'm going to show you now what these do. So if I click this one to the right, it'll go to the next instrument down, which is 0G Vindaloops. Now these aren't in the same order, but this picked up the next one down. It's going alphabetically, no doubt, whereas this is probably not alphabetical. So probably could get it to go. Yeah, so if you put it out of alphabetically, it'll go, should go birds, Vindaloops effects, and then Vindaloops. Birds. So by toggling these, and then effects, and then Vindaloops. Yeah, so it goes now, once I've put them in order of their correct names, it's going through them in sort of sequence there. It skips the folders because the folders are not instruments. This only toggles through the instruments. So that's Vindaloops with no effects. This is birds. And this is Vindaloops with effects. You can hear the reverb there on the instrument. There's one other way to create an instrument. That is if you go... I'll just load this other one that I made earlier. Okay, so if you just bring the sample itself in. So I go down here now. I go to this folder called Jungle Birds. So remember the way the browser works on this that we looked at last time? So you select the folder in the top, and then what's in the folder appears on the bottom. These are not instruments now. You can tell it's got a little waveform, and it also has the extension .wav. So it's a WAV file, which is like, you remember, non-lossy audio. And also you can select those and hit play to hear what they sound like. Or you can toggle the auto, and then you can use either your mouse or your up-down arrows to just scroll quickly through the samples. And you can turn them up and down if they're too loud. So once you click once in the folder, you can use your up-down arrows to check out whatever samples you have in the folder. And you can audition each sample. So that's the auto button. And there's a volume associated with it to keep it from getting too loud in your headphones. Or you can manually play them by just selecting one and hitting play, if you want to do it that way. All of the tips are, remember, whenever you roll over anything, the tips, the little help hints appear down in the bottom of the screen here, and they help you kind of navigate the interface. It's like a dynamic help file, basically. So the other way to create an instrument is to just drag a WAV file into the window, and it will make an instrument. In this case, it'll be called Bubbles, because I'm dragging a file called Bubbles into the window. And then you can see it created an instrument from that. If we look at it, we can see that it's mapped across the entire keyboard from very, very low to very, very high. We'll get to mapping in a minute, but you can sort of hear the effect. Oh, sorry, I'm on the wrong track. So you can hear I'm playing lots of different keys. If you drag in one WAV, it maps across the entire keyboard. It sort of sees the whole thing as if it's some sort of giant grand piano and makes sure that no matter what key you play, you get a sample. Now, you don't always want that. So we will tend to go in and change that. But it is another way to create a sampler instrument in Kontakt, is just drag a WAV file into the window. It'll create an instrument. You can actually, we'll get to that in a minute now when we get to the mapping editor. So there's another way to bring them in as well, but let's keep on track here. Okay, so the next thing I want to look at is those buttons. So we looked at the browse buttons, and the next thing is I want to look at the buttons on the track, on the instrument itself. So there's the pan button. Goes from left to right. You can hear it's going from left to right there as I play. Sometimes the instrument will be too loud and you'll get this and it'll be clipping. Okay, so that one clipped there. See how the red light came on? So that you don't want that. So you keep it down a bit. Now, having said that, a lot of the time the level's a little low in Kontakt. You do need to bring it up a bit. Within reason, of course. So then you have the solo button and the mute button. Not usually that much use. The way we're doing it, we're doing one instrument per track most of the time in Kontakt, in Logic rather. So this is more for when you have multiple instruments in a single rack, which is called a multi-instrument. But we're not really doing that in this module so much. So yeah, I wouldn't bother with that so much. But sometimes things get turned into mute, and you don't want that. So you wouldn't hear anything right now. Once I put mute on, you hear nothing. Okay. If you want to delete the instrument, you hit X, and it will go away. I'm actually not going to delete this one because I want to use this one again. But if I want to delete this new instrument one, so if you just go to the X and delete, it gets rid of it. It's kind of dangerous because I'm not sure. Yeah, you can't hit Command Z and bring it back. It will not work. So yeah, you have to be a bit careful with that one. So once you delete that, it's kind of gone. You're kind of stuck with it. Your decision. No, redo doesn't work. No, not working. Okay, so be careful of that. I'm going to get rid of that because I don't want it. The MIDI section is very important. So let's look at the MIDI section. So this right here, the writing is tiny. I have a hard time seeing this. I just know where everything is. So here we have it. There's a little activity meter, it's called. I'm going to zoom right in so you can see what's going on. There's an activity meter here. And then here's the MIDI channel. And when you drop this down, just like I described it before, you've got the same things appearing there. If I press on my MIDI controller here, you see that? See how that's toggling, flashing? Every time I tap a key, you get a little flash on the MIDI, and it tells you that the MIDI is going in to that virtual instrument. If MIDI is going in and you're still not hearing MIDI, then there's something else wrong and you need to fix it. But at least you know from that little meter that MIDI is going into it. I have this actually set to Omni. Now you might remember from Music Technology 1, Omni means that the MIDI device here listens for all channels, all MIDI channels. If you had a multi-instrument, that would be a problem, but it's not a problem when you have a single instrument. So, but this will work equally as good. Oh, no, it doesn't like that. Okay, so that's good because it was coming in there on a different channel than MIDI 1 from my controller. It's probably my controller. It's probably not set to MIDI channel 1. So when I selected MIDI channel 1, I start tapping away on the controller I'm not getting anything. So I just go back to Omni and it works. So if you're ever stuck, select Omni. Omni will always sort the issue, and if it's not working with that, then there's something else wrong. It could be your volume down or something like that. Okay, so that's the MIDI indicator showing how to direct MIDI ports in, the activity meter, and where it is set on the little display screen there. Next, we'll talk about the edit buttons and how to get under the hood of the sampler, how to get inside. So this is the exciting bit. This is where all the fun begins, really. So you have here a spanner. So you can see this little kind of spanner up here. And you click that, and it gives you access to the editors. And the editors in Kontakt are the group editor, the mapping editor, the wave editor, and the script editor. Now, we'll be going through these. They're all very important. Some are more important than others in this particular module, but yeah, they're all like really kind of useful in different ways. So we'll be looking at these, not right away, and not even today actually. But yeah, there's also an instrument options panel, but I don't touch that. You don't need to mess with that. It's very good at taking care of its own settings most of the time, so I would leave it alone. So like if you wanted to, one thing we will be looking at today is the mapping editor. So the mapping editor shows you where the sample is mapped, like we looked at on the slide. Okay. Come back. You also get access to effects in this module. So if I load, I think my other one had effects on it. No, I'll just load it now. Hold on. So, Vindaloops effects. So those effects are set in there's my effect right there. But it's kind of we'll be going through all this, but it's kind of hidden down there. But once you know where it is, it's not so hard. So that's you can apply the effects inside Kontakt itself, which you don't need to do right away, of course. But it doesn't hurt to know it's there. So that's the kind of stuff you get inside the editor, is features like that. The next thing we'll look at is our power tips. So I showed you the power tips in the slide. So I'm going to actually pull up a different instrument for a change, something that we can change the tuning on where it'll actually make a noticeable difference to what we're talking about. So here's a nice viola da gamba. Now the tune knob, if you change it, you can see it changes in half steps. So it just changes like a chromatic scale, basically, in half steps up and down. So you know yourself, if you're a keyboard player and you're playing with some band, say they're in drop tuning of E flat, and maybe they're not precisely tuned. They could be a little bit somewhere between E flat and E because they're tuning by ear. And you just want to fit in quickly. Well, you can actually hold the shift key and then change the tuning there in little increments. Okay, so you can see how that's just changing in actually what are called cents. So let me try to get this going with the, yeah, there we go. Okay. You can hear how it's going down quite gradually. So that's a fine tuner. A fine tuner by holding down the shift key. So shift and then click and change any controller in Contact, and it will turn into a fine tuner where it tunes it by very, very fine increments. Of course, the problem now is if you try to go, oh, it used to actually keep the 0.79 and not go back. So if you quickly want to reset something to default, like say everyone in this fictitious group scenario we're talking about all of a sudden found their tuners and then tuned up to concert pitch, then you'd want to go quickly back to concert pitch. And let's just go back to a detuned, let's say you're a few cents off there. If you want to reset that to the default setting, which would be A440, then you just hold down the command key and click, and it'll revert any control to default. So I'll take all these off to some weird value, and then I'll use my command click, command click, command click. Everything went back to the default value for that particular instrument. So a couple of very useful shortcuts there. There's plenty of shortcuts in Contact, but those two particularly, which are detailed out on the slide, as I said, are very, very useful indeed. There's a couple of there's a couple of extra instruments in this folder, so you can see that this kind of proves that what I was talking about before. So I've now gone to a preset called Viola da Gamba Drones, which is in the same folder as the other one. Nice instrument, this. And you can see there, it's a different instrument that got loaded. So the next thing we'll talk about is the key map. So the key map is, like we said, like what keys do the samples cover across the keyboard. So here's the instrument that I made earlier. I made this one myself. I didn't make the actual loops myself. They were made by a company called 0G, and the name of the library is Vinda Loops. And it was actually, you hear it an awful lot, especially if you listen to what's called Punjabi music, or sometimes called Bhangra, which is a kind of hybrid fusion of traditional Indian rhythmic music with kind of more pop / DJ sort of sensibilities and styles, kind of urban style music, and it never really went away. It's you sometimes hear it in what's known as the sort of Bollywood setting, So I made a library. I bought this sampler library, and years ago, and here it is, so that you can hear it. I'm just going to get rid of that keyboard from the bottom. Ooh, is that the right one? Yeah, that's it. If you want a little more space, you can get rid of your keyboard from the bottom, which I just did via the view. There it is back. I want it away. Get rid of it. And when you first look at this, it's kind of hard to see. It usually presents something like this when you open it, and it's difficult to see what sample is mapped where. It's very, there's a lot of keys in Contact. You're going from C-2 all the way up to beyond C8. It's got a very, very wide range. But if you look down to the bottom right of that window, you can toggle this out, and then you can actually more clearly see the key map for each of the samples. And you can see that every single key is mapped to... every sample is mapped to a single key. Now, it does not have to be that way, but that's the way it is with this right now. So every time I go up a half step, I'm playing the next sample up. Yeah, you kind of want this with rhythmic stuff usually. You don't want any kind of pitch shift on your loops. Although that's not always true. Sometimes it is done. So to demonstrate, I want to go to the bird sample. I want to get the bubbles. Remember the bubbles? We heard that before. And I want to just drag that out over here. And right now I've got assigned, actually it's assigned across 2 keys right now. You can see that up here. If you look, it says from F2 to F#2. And then if you want to change that, it's not hard. You just go in and drag it out across as many keys as you want. And you hear it, you can see this is the root key down here. If you deselect a sample, like I was describing you to before, it actually turns into a kind of blue color. And the name of the sample you'll find up on top. If it's mapped to a very short thing, the name is scribed out vertically. So this is Dolac 091 is the BPM, so it's 91 BPM. Bubbles doesn't have any BPM. It probably has some sort of like rhythm that you could derive from it, but I'm not sure what that is. So let's see if we can play the bubbles. There they are. And the higher up you go. So yeah, you don't always want that. If you wanted lower ones, well, there's a couple of ways to do it. You can drag this in, drag the whole thing up, drag this back down. Now we've got transposed down, because this is the original key, the original pitch. And now you're playing a lower key, so you're getting a lower pitch. So that's the key map for bubbles right now. The key map, that sample, bubbles, is mapped over the key range E2 all the way up to D4. And you'll always find that up there somewhere in the mapping editor. So there's very useful information in the mapping editor. You can do other things too. You can let's just drag this back in again. You can keep dragging these in if you like. So, get my bird. Where is he? So you saw that you can pan up here, but that pans the entire instrument. If you just wanted the birds panned or the bubbles panned, let's pan the bubbles actually, because this is and then we'll make the bubbles appear to be on the left. So you can see up here I've selected this, and then I've got this pan. Now the bubbles are totally left because I was able to pan them here. You can also tune individual notes, and this is very useful if you're sampling like a real acoustic instrument and like say one of the strings was a little out of tune, a little flat. You can actually kind of tune it up by a few cents here. It's one of those really, really useful, but it works only on the individual samples inside the mapping editor. So bubbles is now panned all the way to the left, but if you select the jungle, the birds are panned center. So that's very useful stuff going on there in the mapping editor. So there's my birds. They're panned directly ahead, so you hear them coming from all around you, left and right channels. And then when I hit the bubbles, they should come from the very, very, very left. So birds in a jungle atmosphere all around you, but bubbles coming from the left, which is a kind of a nice almost piece of sound design or something, because it's like you're walking through the jungle and all of a sudden you come across this bubbling sort of pond or something like that. But yeah, in fact, these sort of samplers can be used a lot in sound design. So that's the key map. I mean, there's actually a lot more we can do with the key map, but we're not going to go into that today. But I just thought I'd show you these few things. And then the last thing I just want to say is that for next week, I'm going to have you make a sampler instrument with your own samples, package it up, and then kind of send it on to me. So let me just quickly make a new one so you can see what that would look like. So So if you just want to make an instrument from scratch, new instrument, and then you can name it. It would help if you put your name on it. Then I would know who's. Oh, sorry, I'm in the wrong. My bad. So you need to go to the actual instrument there and just select that, the title there, and then I'll rename it to my name. Okay. So now that's named. Then I'm going to just going to drag a few samples in. Tell you what, I'm going to go straight into the mapping editor, and instead of dragging one this time, I'm going to drag a bunch of them. So I'm going to drag all of these, and you can see one more cool thing about the mapping editor. So I've selected all of these now in the left hand pane and drag them in. See what's happened? As long as you don't let go of the mouse, you can either map them all to a single keys, or you can kind of spread them out a bit so that you have a bit more range on each of these. Sorry, I think I'm on the... I'm going to move these down because my MIDI controller's transposed a bit. Okay, so a bunch of samples in there now. You can close this up. So the next thing I want to do is save it. So I've created this instrument and it has all these samples in it that I dragged in, but that doesn't actually exist. If you were to close Logic now without saving it, you would lose this instrument. It would be gone forever. Plus, I'm not asking you to hand up a Logic project to me. I want you to just hand up the instrument itself. So I'm going to save this and let's see how we get on with that. So to save it, you go File. You usually want to go Save As. I'm not exactly sure why. It should say Save, but it says Save As. Yeah, I'm not really sure why it does that, but it does. Anyway, if you go over, it says instrument number 1, Duck's instrument. So instrument number 1 is always the first one in the rack, and then it has the name of the instrument. So you know you're on the right one. If you've given it your own name, you'll recognize it right away. So then click on that, and it takes you out into a browser. And I'm going to go to this folder here, which is where I was before. Now, this is where you got to be careful. You want patch and samples. You want to save the samples as well. Any of you guys hands up one without the samples, you're going to lose marks. And that'll happen if you select patch only. So you want patch and samples. Alternately, you can give me a monolith, but I think I explained to you in class why I don't like monoliths. They're scary. Stuff can get stuck in there forever, and you never get it out. And you don't really want to compress the samples. That's not a good idea. So then I go Save. And you see there was a bit of activity there where it said saving samples. And that's because it's saving out this virtual instrument file, which is an NKI. We looked at that before. But it's also saving a folder with the same name. And that has the samples in it. So let's go and take a look. And oh, it's disappeared. It's gone somewhere. I don't know where that ended up. Oh, because we're in the wrong folder. Sorry. Bear with me. There it is. Okay. So we'll finish on this. See, there's my instrument. And there's the actual samples. So there, you saw me drag the samples in a second ago. There was Bubbles, Dry Frog 2, all these ones. So usually what I do then is I kind of wrap that up into a second folder to keep everything safe. So in the Mac, you go right click, new folder with selection, and then copy the name in. And then you have a nice folder with ducks.inst nki, duck.inst samples. If you were to kind of click on that, it should open just in Contact itself. That's what should happen. Oops, sorry. Okay, well, it seems to be active. I'm just not sure. Oh, there it is. Okay, so once again, I had to switch out of the library view. I got to say that library view business is really annoying. But there it is in standalone Contact. I'm not in Logic. I can quit Logic now, and you can see that that doesn't matter anymore. There's Contact as a standalone with the instruments in there. It doesn't seem to be sending the audio out to the right place, but figure that one out later. But you can see it worked. And all of the samples loaded. So you open this up, the samples load properly. I just want to show you what happens when you separate the audio samples. So I'm just going to put those somewhere else, like on the desktop. And then I'm going to try to open this again. Now this time I haven't saved it properly. I haven't included the samples. I've messed up my move. I'm going to click on this and see what happens. And you see you get this error message, content missing. This is what I would get if you were to hand up the project with the files missing, and then of course it's no good. You can ignore it, but you can see you get these like purple things. They don't look right, and there's a red error on it as well, and you'll get no sounds playing whatsoever. Nothing happening on the meters because the sounds aren't there. It'll save the structure. It'll save where you mapped what sample, but until you actually repatriate the samples into the sampler folder, then nothing's ever going to work for this case. So yes, I'm just going to hit Command Z and hopefully it'll put it back. Yes, so I'll just put that back in there and then it'll work again. So be very, very careful when you're saving your instrument for next week that you make sure that the samples are there. Actively go and check yourself. And it doesn't hurt to take it over to a second machine and open it on the second machine and see if it's opening. That'll tell you. Okay, that's it. I won't go on anymore. Have fun going through these. Email me if you have any questions. And good luck with your assignment. Thanks.